Do not come over anymore. Keep your distance. My son hit send in our family group chat. His wife tapped, like as if it were a meme and not a sentence that sliced through 30 years of sacrifice. I was holding a bowl of chicken noodle soup for Lily because she had a cold, and I had promised to drop it off. The spoon clinked against the ceramic when my hand went numb. I stared at those words, 4 plain sentences, no apology, no explanation, just distance, a clean cut. For a moment I could not breathe, then something quiet and cold settled inside me. I opened my banking app, the same app I had used to pay their mortgage every month since they bought that house in Blue Ash. Mortgage auto pay $2,800. Canceled. Monthly transfers $5,000. Canceled. College fund for Lily $200. Paused. I scrolled to the trust account I had built from selling my cleaning company after my husband passed and from the insurance payout that took 2 years of paperwork. $500,000. I transferred the full amount into a high-yield account under my name only. Ting-Ting. The confirmation appeared gentle and bright like the sound of a silver spoon tapping glass. On their phones, it must have appeared like a punch. I set the soup down and walked to the sink. Not angry, not shaking, just steady. I had spent years shrinking myself so my son and his wife would not accuse me of needing them too much. And now they sent me a text telling me to vanish. The kitchen felt too quiet. The clock ticked 3 times before another notification arrived. Trisha Brittany's mother, the woman who always called me dear in a sticky, sweet voice, sent a private message. It is healthier for older women to build lives away from their children. You should let them grow without you watching every move. I stared at that sentence. Older women, as if I were rotting fruit on a counter. I walked to the living room and picked up the photo on the shelf. Jake at 7, missing 2 teeth, holding a Little League trophy. I had worked double night shifts to afford that uniform. He used to run to me after every game yelling, "Mom, I saw you in the stands." My daughter-in-law Brittany posted a story at that exact moment. A pastel background looping text that read, "Boundaries are love." Under it, a smiling selfie with a glass of wine, her nails glossy and perfect. She looked like someone celebrating, not someone who had just told the woman paying her bills to disappear. Ting-Ting, 7:01 p.m. Another alert on the shared account they monitored. 500,000 removed. My phone started vibrating nonstop. First Jake, then Brittany, then unknown numbers, then Jake again. I let it ring. I made tea. Chamomile with honey. My breathing stayed slow. I had a different kind of power now. I looked at the old sewing gloves hanging on a peg near the kitchen door. The leather was worn along the fingers where my mother had mended them after I ripped them at work. I kept those gloves because they reminded me that hands can break and heal and still keep working. 2 years ago, I created a folder labeled Lily College Fund. Inside was a tiny envelope with her crayon drawing of us holding hands. I whispered, "Grandma loves you, but love without respect turns into a cage." Another vibration, this time a message from Jake. "Mom, this is a misunderstanding. We just need space. Please do not make this complicated." My hands did not tremble. I typed one sentence. "You asked for distance. I am giving you financial distance too. Send." Silence. The kind of silence that feels like fresh snow covering everything. I sat on the couch and sipped my tea. The taste was warm and honest. For years, they had called me helpful with a smile that was not a smile. For years, they accepted my money without looking me in the eye. If I showed up unannounced, I was told the house was messy. If I offered to babysit, I was told Lily needed routine. If I brought food, they whispered that I was smothering them. Tonight, I decided to smother nothing. I gave them exactly what they wanted. Freedom. At 60 minutes after that first text, the panic began. Jake again. Mom answer. "The mortgage is due tomorrow." "I thought you paid." Brittany. "Why would you do this? This is cruel." Trisha. "Older women should not weaponize money." I felt a bitter laugh rise in my chest. Weaponize. If asking for respect was a weapon, then they had been shooting at me for years. The doorbell rang. Fast, sharp, urgent. I did not answer. I sat in the dark and watched the streetlight paint gold stripes across the floor. I felt calm for the first time in months. They thought I would beg to be let back in. They thought I would explain myself. They had no idea who I used to be, who I still was. Tomorrow I would call my lawyer. Tomorrow I would print every transfer, every "we will pay you back" text, every receipt. But tonight I just breathed. If you have ever been pushed out of your own family, if you have ever been told you were a burden after giving everything you had, then type the word boundary. Sometimes quiet justice starts with one simple click. I live in a small apartment in Oakley, a quiet neighborhood outside Cincinnati where the streets are lined with maple trees, and the same mailman has walked the route for 20 years. In March of 2023, I was still running Elaine Clean and Care LLC, a tiny office cleaning company that I built from nothing after my husband passed. Most nights, I worked alone in empty buildings, where the lights hummed and the floors smelled like lemon disinfectant. My lower back ached from 12 years of lifting trash bins and pushing industrial vacuums, but I kept going because my son Jake said he needed help until things got better. He always said things would get better. Blue Ash was where Jake and Brittany lived, in a beige 2-story house with a yard and white-trimmed windows. They picked it because it was close to good schools and because Brittany wanted a neighborhood with holiday decorations that looked good on Instagram. The down payment was $95,000 money I took from selling my business van and from the insurance payout after Mark's death. Jake promised he would pay me back once the promotions at his company went through. They never went through. I was the one standing as guarantor on the mortgage. Auto pay for $2,800 came from my account every month like clockwork, even on the months when my own bills were late. A few months later, Brittany said the stress of house bills made Jake anxious, so they needed help with other expenses too. At first, I transferred $3,000 a month, then $4,000, then $5,000. Every request came with the same sentence: just until things stabilize. I believed them because I wanted to believe that my son would remember who stood behind him. I also paid their internet and part of the electric bill because the company would not give them a decent rate due to their low credit score. The invoices were addressed to their house, but I paid them from mine. I kept track of every receipt because I was raised to believe that records keep people honest. In the summer of 2023, we had a family lunch at a small diner in Kenwood. The place smelled like bacon and old coffee, the kind of smell that sinks into the booths. Lily colored on her placemat with broken crayons while the rest of us waited for pancakes. Jake talked about work. Brittany talked about how Lily might start dance classes, and I just listened with a smile because being near them made everything worth it. Then Brittany laughed lightly and said to the couple at the next table that I meant well, but sometimes I was just clingy. She said it like a joke, but her eyes did not look playful. The couple laughed politely. Jake stayed silent and stared at his phone. My face burned. I folded my napkin until my hands stopped shaking. That was the first seed of something I could not name. I drove home after lunch with the window cracked to let the cold air wake me. At a red light, I scrolled through old text messages from Jake. Messages from a year before. "We will pay you back, Mom, as soon as Brittany starts the new remote job. Promise." Those words looked innocent when he said them. Now they felt like empty receipts. I opened a folder on my laptop and saved screenshots of every transfer and every promise. Not out of anger, out of self-protection. That same week, I logged into the business credit account for my cleaning company. I noticed an extra gas charge. I had added Jake as an authorized user years ago when money was tight and he needed help buying groceries. I remembered how grateful he had been at the time. Now I removed him quietly. I clicked save. No notification would alert him. It was just a small step of taking my life back. In May of 2024, Brittany posted photos of a new sofa in their living room. Italian leather in a soft gray color that did not look like something a couple struggling with bills would buy. She added a caption about manifesting abundance. I recognized the brand because I once cleaned an office building next to that furniture store, and I knew the price tag. I checked the Lilly College Fund. $12,000 had been taken out with a memo that said temporary borrow. My chest tightened. That money was supposed to be sacred. I asked Jake about it, and he said Brittany had handled it. He told me not to worry and said there would be a replacement soon. He did not meet my eyes. In July, they went to a steakhouse downtown for Brittany's birthday. She posted a story clinking glasses of champagne saying, "Date night with my love." I watched from my apartment after another 12-hour shift. My phone showed a missed call from Brittany earlier that day. The voicemail said, "Rent is killing us. Can you send the transfer early this month?" I looked at the picture of the champagne in her hand. I looked at the bruises forming across my knuckles from scrubbing floors. Something inside me shifted. On a quiet Sunday, Jake asked me in front of neighbors if I had already sent the mortgage payment. He asked loudly, as if I were a bank teller who forgot a transaction. Brittany laughed under her breath and said, "Older folks need reminders." A few people looked at me with sympathy. I felt myself turn into a shadow. I smiled gently, said, "Yes, dear," and walked away. Later that night, I opened a box of old printed photos. Jake graduating, Jake and Lily in the backyard, Jake hugging me after his wedding, telling me he would always take care of me. I pressed my thumb against that image. The ink had started to fade. In August of 2024, I received another request. Brittany said she needed a new laptop for work and that Lily needed school supplies. The transfer would be $3,000. I sent it because I did not want Lily to lack anything. Hours later, Brittany posted a photo of herself with a designer handbag with the caption, "Treating myself today." My heart went quiet in my chest. I opened my email and sent a message to my lawyer friend Samuel asking for a consultation. Not to start a war, just to understand my rights. That same week, I reprinted the old text messages. "We will pay you back." I slipped them into a folder labeled "Important." I knew they might matter one day. The first real drop came in October during the PTA Fall fundraiser at Hyde Park School, a sunny Saturday, filled with folding tables, pumpkin decorations, and families pretending everything in their lives was picture perfect. I brought a homemade pecan pie because Lily loved the taste of toasted sugar on warm nuts, and because I wanted her to see her grandmother participating like everyone else. The gym smelled like apple cider and crayons. Children ran around with raffle tickets while parents made small talk about bake sales and soccer schedules. I spotted Jake and Brittany at a table near the stage. Brittany was wearing a tan sweater and perfect makeup, and she looked me up and down with a smile that did not reach her eyes. She leaned toward a group of mothers I recognized from Lily's class and said in a soft voice made loud by intention that sometimes older folks should give space so young families can breathe. Her words floated out like perfume, sweet but sharp. The other women nodded politely, though one of them glanced at me and looked embarrassed. I felt the sting rise under my skin. I set my pie down and forced my breath to stay even. I told myself not to react because reacting was what Brittany always wanted. Families walked around the bake sale table choosing cookies and cupcakes. Lily tugged at my sleeve and asked for a cider donut, and I bought her too. For a moment, everything felt normal. Then Jake called across the table loud enough for every parent within 10 feet to hear. "Mom, did you send the mortgage yet?" His voice carried across the gym. Heads turned. A father holding a tray of brownies paused mid-step. Brittany sipped cider as if this were a casual question. I felt my face go still. The words were public, pointed, humiliating. I nodded and said softly, "Yes, honey, it is handled." But the damage was done. I saw the pitying looks from strangers who assumed I forgot or who assumed I needed prompting like a child. When people pity you, they stop seeing you as human. After that moment, I excused myself to the hallway. I stood near a bulletin board filled with construction paper leaves, and I let the air cool my face. I reminded myself that silence can be stronger than shouting. Later that afternoon, I went to their house to drop off the remaining pie. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and candles. Brittany took the Tupperware, smiled, and placed the pie next to the sink, far from the dessert plates laid out for guests. She snapped a photo of the empty dessert plates filled with fruit and posted a story that said, "Trying healthy." My pie sat alone in the corner like a forgotten thing. I felt the humiliation settle deeper, not loud, but heavy. I washed my hands in their sink and saw that the dish soap bottle was half full, the same brand I had been buying for them every month. I said goodnight and drove home in silence. That evening, I opened my phone plan app. I had been paying for their lines for 2 years, and the bill kept climbing. Brittany streamed movies, Jake used data for gaming, and their phones constantly updated with new apps. They never thanked me. It was always assumed that I would handle it. I clicked on Manage Lines. My finger hovered over the screen. I thought about everything I paid for without being asked kindly. Then I removed their lines from my family plan and switched them to individual billing. The system would notify the carrier, and the carrier would eventually notify them. Their bill would jump. It was small, quiet revenge, the kind that makes a person feel the ground shift without knowing why. I clicked Confirm and felt something loosen inside my chest. A week later, we all attended a small get-together at Trisha's house. She lived in a condo with white carpets and glass vases that looked too fragile to touch. She served sparkling water and cheese plates. Everyone complimented her decorations. During the conversation, she held out her hand to show a new ring with a large gemstone. She said Brittany helped her pick it out. The stone glittered under the light. She mentioned casually that she financed it because one should enjoy life now and worry about payments later. I smiled politely. I knew that the electric bill for her condo still arrived in my name due to a mix-up when Brittany had tried to set up utilities months before. I never bothered to fix it because I assumed they would handle it once their credit improved. They never did. That bill arrived at my apartment every month. I paid it every month. As Trisha admired her ring, I thought of that bill. I thought of how the world saw me as supportive and generous, while those closest to me saw me as a wallet with aging hands. A day after the fundraiser, I received a thank you text in the family chat. It was short. Thanks for food. No heart emoji. No name. Just letters. Then Brittany posted a photo of her pecan pie from a fancy bakery with the caption, "Homemade vibe for fall." She never mentioned mine. The humiliation was not dramatic or loud. It was a series of small cuts that made me bleed internally. Every time I gave, they took, then pretended the giving never happened. The PTA mothers had looked at me with sympathy. The neighbors assumed I was forgetful with bills, and my own son treated me like a reminder app. I began to see how financial dependence can erase dignity. It does not happen all at once. It erodes like water on stone. After the fundraiser, I went through every bill in my email. I found the one from the utility company for Trisha's condo. I stared at the account number, a strange symbol of how deeply I had entangled myself to help them. I called the company and asked for a transfer of responsibility. The representative told me that because I was the guarantor, I needed their signatures. I sighed and said maybe later. I was learning that freedom is not just leaving. It is untying knots, one string at a time. That night, I sat at my small kitchen table and ate a slice of my own pie. The crust was flaky, the filling sweet. I saved the rest for Lily because she liked to warm it in the microwave for 10 seconds, so the pecans softened. I wondered how she would feel when she was old enough to understand what her parents had done. I did not want her to learn that love meant using someone until they broke. The humiliation at the school fundraiser stayed with me. I replayed Jake's voice in my head. "Mom, did you send the mortgage?" It was not a question. It was a command disguised as a concern. The mothers at the table had stared. The children heard. My own son had turned me into a public spectacle while I was helping him stay afloat. The next morning, I woke early to clean an office building in downtown Cincinnati. As I scrubbed a coffee stain from a conference table, I felt a new kind of resolve settle into my bones. They had humiliated me publicly. They had treated my help like a service owed. But they did not know that quiet people can be powerful when pushed to the edge. In that empty office, I whispered to myself that there would come a day when I would stop paying without warning. They would feel the cost of disrespect in every overdue bill. The first drop was not loud. It was quiet and sharp like glass breaking under a rug, but it was enough to wake me. The months after the fundraiser were a tangle of small humiliations and bigger betrayals, each one wrapped in polite words and smiling faces. The first loop came in November when I checked the Lily College Fund to make sure her next school payment would go through. The balance looked thinner than it should. I scrolled through the transaction history and saw a withdrawal of $12,000 labeled temporary borrow. My heart pressed hard against my ribs. That fund had always been the one place I thought they would never touch. I called Jake and asked why there was a withdrawal. He hesitated, then said Brittany had found a great deal on furniture, and they needed something that made the house feel cozy. I remembered the Italian sofa I saw in her story 2 weeks before the one she captioned with "Found our dream piece." I asked if they used Lily's money for that. He said it was just temporary and that they would replace it once their crypto investments paid out. I stared at the word investments. I could not speak for several seconds. When I finally did, I said Lily should not pay for adult comfort. Jake said I was being dramatic and ended the call. That night, I sat on my couch and imagined Lily sitting on that expensive sofa, eating crackers while her college money sat in someone's living room as leather upholstery. The second loop happened in December when I discovered a $7,500 charge tied to the business credit account for Elaine Clean and Care. I had given Jake the card years ago when he needed groceries and gas, and I never removed him because I trusted him. I called the credit company and asked for the merchant name. The representative told me it was a crypto exchange. I asked if the purchase was recent. She said yes, 3 days ago. I closed my eyes and breathed slowly. I remembered Brittany's younger brother, Dylan, and how he often asked Jake for financial advice. I knew at once the investment was not for Lily or the house. It was for someone else's gamble. I texted Jake and asked if he had used my business card for crypto. He replied with 2 words. It is complicated. He told me Dylan needed help and that family helps family. I wanted to laugh. Family helps family until the help becomes theft. I screenshot the charge and saved it in my folder of proof. The third loop came quietly without any money attached, but it hurt at a deeper level. I went to their house to bring Lily some homemade cookies. When I walked in, Brittany was on the phone with her friend. She did not notice me at first. I heard her say that sometimes she felt like I was an ATM with feelings and she just had to swipe kindness to get what she wanted. The friend laughed. Brittany laughed. The words fell into me like stones. I stepped back from the doorway and pretended I had just walked in. She turned surprised and gave me a hug that felt like cold cotton. I handed Lily the cookies and left quickly before anyone saw the tears press against my eyelids. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and stared at my bank statements. Every transfer, every payment, every bill I had covered lay in neat lines, like a ledger of love turned into debt. I realized I had been financing their lifestyle while they mocked my existence, so I acted in small ways they could not trace. I logged into the rewards account attached to the business credit card. I saw hundreds of thousands of travel points that Brittany had been bragging about using for a summer vacation. I changed the password. I redeemed every point for gift cards and cashback offers that went directly into my personal account. It was a quiet action. They would only notice when the vacation did not show up as expected. Stealth revenge feels like air moving under a closed door. No one sees it, but everything changes. In January, a new betrayal arrived, dressed in soft words. Brittany hosted a dinner at a steakhouse called Jeff Ruby's. The reservation looked fancy. She posted a photo of champagne glasses and the caption celebrating love. I saw Jake in the background smiling like nothing was wrong. I checked my messages at the same time and saw a request for help with utilities because the winter had been cold. They wanted $3,000 to cover bills. I looked at the champagne in the photo and then at the message asking for help. I took a screenshot of the story and saved it next to the utility request. I thought of how often they said they were tight on money and how often their photos told a different story. I wondered if their friends knew that their lifestyle was built on my tired back and fading savings. The next morning, I cleaned an office in downtown Cincinnati. While wiping down glass doors, I thought about how every act of generosity had been turned into a joke, how every dollar had been spent as if it came from the sky. I started collecting screenshots, emails, receipts, and messages. I created a folder named Receipts and filled it like armor. Each file felt like a small piece of strength returning to me. One evening, Jake came by to drop off a package. He asked if I could increase the monthly transfer for a few months until tax season. He said the market was tough and they needed stability for Lily. I asked if they remembered the $12,000 taken from her college fund. He looked away and said it would be returned soon. I told him spending a child's future on a sofa was wrong. He looked offended and said my generation did not understand modern parenting. The words cut deeper than he knew. I said nothing more. After he left, I checked the credit card again. Another charge for a restaurant, another call for money, another story about blessings and gratitude. The loops of abuse were not loud or violent. They were repetitive and exhausting. I became the silent foundation, holding up their lives while mine cracked at the corners. But something inside me was changing. I was not going to be their quiet safety net forever. As I printed the screenshots from Jeff Ruby's, I lined them next to the utility bill request. The dates were only hours apart. Champagne and please send money, luxury and we are tight, lies layered on top of lies. I stared at the papers and felt a heat build in my chest. It was not rage, it was clarity. One day, they would have to answer for this. I was gathering the evidence of their betrayal. I was building a record that no one could deny. Money has a memory, even when people pretend it does not. These loops of disrespect became the steps that led me toward the moment where everything would turn. The breaking point did not arrive in a dramatic explosion. It came in a quiet evening, thick with ordinary sounds, a night when I should have been asleep, but instead drove to Blue Ash to bring Lily her forgotten lunchbox for the next morning. I parked in the driveway and saw the kitchen light glowing. The garage door was slightly open, just enough that voices slipped through the crack like cold air. I heard Brittany on the phone with her mother. Her tone was light and cheerful. She said once she stops popping in, we can finally turn the guest room into a glam closet. I froze. The words turned my stomach. Popping in. As if my visits to bring soup cookies or school supplies were intrusions. As if I were a stray animal sniffing around the house. Then she laughed quietly and added that the closet would look great in pictures. I took a step back from the garage door and felt my heartbeat rising into my throat. I tried to walk toward the front door, but my legs felt heavy. I stood beneath the yellow porch light and listened to my own breath. My son stepped into the garage phone in hand, unaware that I had heard everything. I tapped the glass door gently. He turned and looked surprised. I handed him the lunchbox and said, "Lily forgot this." He nodded and said thanks without warmth. Then he added, "Maybe you should call before coming by because Brittany gets stressed when you show up." I swallowed hard and asked if that was why they took money from the college fund. He sighed loudly, the sound of a man tired of his own mother, and said maybe you should try a senior center or something. They have activities. The words pierced deeper than any insult before. A senior center. As if my entire life had shrunk to insignificant days that needed scheduled activities to keep me busy. He turned away and closed the door slowly without even waiting for my reply. I walked back to my car in silence. The night smelled like damp leaves and cold wind. I drove onto Columbia Parkway without turning the radio on. The city lights blurred past me. When I reached the Roebling Bridge, I parked on the side near the water and stared at the dark river. Cincinnati reflected on the surface like a broken mirror. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. For a moment, I let myself fall apart. I pressed my forehead against the wheel and cried until my chest hurt. I remembered how Mark used to stand in the kitchen and dance with Lily when she was a toddler, how he used to kiss my forehead and say that I carried everyone on my back. He told me once that the stronger a woman is, the more people mistake her strength for endless supply. He warned me that people forget you are human when you are always the helper. I wished he were here. I wished someone would knock on the car window and ask if I was okay, but no one came. The river roared softly beneath the bridge. I cried until there were no tears left and my breathing slowed. Then I sat up straight. I wiped my face with my sleeve. My heart did not feel broken anymore. It felt sharpened. I whispered a single word in the dark. No, it hung in the air like a promise. I turned the car around and drove home. The next morning, I woke up with swollen eyes but a clear mind. I opened my laptop and found the email for the furniture store where Brittany bought her Italian sofa. I wrote a short message explaining that the order was under a pending finance status and the credit profile was unstable. I asked if the approval had gone through and if there were any adjustments to the interest rate. It was just a question, polite and calm, but I knew that a simple inquiry could trigger a review. When stores realize a customer might have difficulty paying, they sometimes adjust the annual percentage rate or demand a larger deposit. I pressed send. I did not tell anyone. It was not revenge in a loud sense. It was a tug on a thread that held their comfort together. If the thread snapped, they would feel it even if they never traced it back to me. A week later, I went to clean an office near Fountain Square. During my break, I checked my phone and saw a new screenshot in the family group chat. Brittany had posted a picture of the living room complaining that the finance company was questioning their credit again. She added a sad face emoji and wrote, "This is so exhausting." Jake replied that he would call the company. I took a sip of my coffee and felt a strange calm settle over me. They had never wondered how much work I put into keeping them afloat. Now they would have to try standing on their own unsteady legs. The real blow came that evening. My phone buzzed with a group chat message from Jake. He wrote, "Do not come over anymore. Keep your distance." Brittany liked the message with a small thumbs up. It looked so small on the screen, a tiny icon that felt like a hammer. I stared at the words. I felt no shock this time, just quiet. They wanted distance, so I gave them distance. Financial distance, emotional distance, every kind of distance a mother can give and still survive. I opened my banking app and did what I knew would change their world in less than an hour. I canceled every autopay. I revoked every access. I moved the largest portion of my life savings to a private account. I imagined their phones lighting up when the alerts came through. I imagined panic replacing arrogance. Then I turned off my notifications. The dark tunnel was not just about pain. It was about clarity. I learned that night who I was in their eyes. A burden, a bank, a convenience, not a mother. I sat in my apartment and listened to the ticking clock. I thought of Mark again and how he used to say that storms do not break strong trees. They show which branches were already dead. When the first call came from Jake, I let it ring. When the second came, I put my phone face down. I made tea and sat by the window to watch the streetlights flicker. I breathed slowly. I had reached my breaking point, and instead of collapsing, I had chosen to stand. The night they told me to keep my distance was the night everything shifted. I sat at my small kitchen table in Oakley with a mug of lukewarm tea and a calm so deep it felt like stone, settling at the bottom of a river. The words were still on the group chat screen. Cold and simple. Do not come over anymore. Keep your distance. Brittany had validated it with a tiny thumbs up. I stared at the phone for a full minute, not shocked anymore, only certain. I whispered the same word I had spoken on Roebling Bridge. No. I opened my laptop and logged into the account where the revocable trust lived like a sleeping giant. Inside, it sat $500,000, a collection of my life's work. Every paycheck from cleaning offices every late night, every bottle of arthritis pills every morning when I forced myself out of bed after Mark died because the bills did not care that I was grieving. I clicked transfer to my high-yield savings account, the only account under my name alone. The bank system asked if I was sure. I typed, yes. The screen blinked once, then displayed a confirmation number. Ting-Ting 500,000 gone from the shared view that Jake and Brittany monitored like hungry birds, watching a field. I imagined their phones lighting up when the alert hit. I imagined the comfortable world that sat on top of my back begin to tilt. Next, I logged into the mortgage platform. The auto pay of $2,800 had run like a pulse for 2 years. Even when I could not buy myself a new pair of shoes, I made sure that payment went through because a mother does not let her child lose a home. But that home was not mine. I clicked cancel. A warning popped up reminding me that accounts could become overdue. I closed it without hesitating. Then I canceled the utilities I had been paying in silence. Electric, gas, internet. Every month those bills came through as if it were a law of nature that I would cover them. Now they would arrive unpaid. I logged into the business account where Jake was still an authorized user. Removing him took 1 click. I imagined his next swipe at a gas station failing. I imagined Brittany asking why. I opened the Amex account I used to pay for cleaning supplies and canceled the additional card. The page asked for a reason. I typed account restructuring. Then I opened the insurance account. I had kept Jake and Brittany listed on my auto policy to lower their rate. I removed them. My phone buzzed with the soft sound of an email alert. Confirmation after confirmation. It felt like closing 1,000 little wounds. In less than an hour, I had pulled the entire financial rug out from under them. The clock on the stove read 7:01 p.m., when the first alert must have hit their phones. My screen stayed quiet because I had turned all notifications off. I poured myself a fresh cup of tea and sat on the couch, knowing the storm would come. It did. The phone started buzzing like a trapped wasp. First Jake called, then Brittany, then Jake again. I let it ring. When the ringing stopped, the messages came. Mom, there is something wrong with the trust. Did you touch it? Then the sound of another call. I ignored them. Brittany sent a message in the group chat. Why did you do this? This is cruel. I stared at the screen, took a slow breath, and typed 1 sentence. Distance respected financially, too. I pressed send. The silence that followed felt like the moment after lightning strikes, when the world waits to see what will catch fire. The calls did not stop. Jake tried calling from his phone, then from his work phone, then from unknown numbers. I placed my phone face down and listened to the ticking of the clock. I thought about how many years I had been told not to show up without warning, how many times I had been asked to lower my voice, not embarrass them, not act like a burden. Now they had to live without the burden of my money. I turned on a small lamp and read a book. I let the world outside crash. At 8:00 p.m., there was pounding at my door. I did not move. I heard Jake calling my name. He said he just needed to talk. He said I was overreacting. I kept reading. He knocked harder. Then Brittany's voice layered on top of his shrill demanding. You cannot just take money. This is not okay. I put my book down and walked to the kitchen to refill my tea. I remembered the sewing gloves on the wall and the photograph of Jake at 7. I remembered how small he looked holding that first trophy. I remembered the nights I fed him, the days I skipped meals so he could have new shoes. I remembered every smile he gave me before adulthood turned him into a stranger. The knocking stopped. The hallway went silent. I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. My phone buzzed again with a text from Jake. We need help, Mom. We cannot lose the house. Please answer. Something inside me softened, but I held still. Help only means something when it is wanted without conditions. He had told me to keep my distance. Now he could live with his own words. I typed a reply. I will not be spoken to like a burden. When respect returns, maybe we can talk. Then I locked my door, turned off the lamp, and went to bed. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains. I checked my phone. 22 missed calls. 7 voice messages. Brittany had sent a message saying that I was ruining their life and that a real mother would not abandon her family. I laughed quietly. Abandonment was what they did when they pressed like on that message telling me to disappear. I replied with one sentence, "I did not abandon you." I stepped back as requested. Then I set the phone down and went to make breakfast. Revenge did not need to be loud. It did not need to be violent. It was simply justice finally applied. They would feel every overdue notice, every declined card, every moment of panic. They would learn what distance really meant. And for the first time in years, I could breathe without weight on my chest. The morning after the calls and the pounding on my door broke into silence, I woke with a clarity that felt like clean air in my lungs. The distance I had finally claimed was not just emotional, it was legal and financial, and now I needed structure. For years, Jake and Brittany treated every payment as a gift because accepting something as a loan means acknowledging responsibility. They had never wanted responsibility. They wanted comfort. I brewed coffee, sat at the table, and opened the folder labeled Receipts. Inside were bank statements covering 18 months of transfers, screenshots of stories, showing champagne dinners on nights they told me they were broke, and the texts where Jake wrote, "We will pay you back as soon as the promotion comes through." I printed everything and placed it in neat stacks. Each paper felt like a brick I was laying to build a wall between my life and theirs. That afternoon, I drove to the office of my lawyer, Samuel Price, a quiet man in his 50s who had known Mark from Rotary Club meetings. He offered me tea, but my hands were already steady. I laid the receipts on his desk. He put on his glasses, read silently, and nodded. He asked only one question. "Do you want repayment or just peace?" I told him peace and repayment can hold hands. He smiled in that tired way lawyers do when they see justice finally begin. Samuel drafted a demand letter that framed everything as a loan, not a gift. He included repayment terms across 5 years at 60% of the total reasonable and legally sound. He attached copies of texts, bank transfers, and the timeline of their luxury spending. He even printed screenshots of Brittany's stories at Jeff Ruby's The New Sofa, the champagne nights, each one dated within hours of messages, claiming they were tight and needed money for bills. He said these public posts would help show intent and misuse of funds. The folder he built was thicker than I expected. He labeled it Receipts in capital letters and slid it into a bright blue folder. That folder would become my shield. Next, Samuel helped create 3 simple slides for the day when the truth would be spoken out loud. Slide 1 showed the monthly transfers, each date listed clearly. Slide 2 showed the text messages where Jake promised repayment. Slide 3 showed the luxury timeline, a contrast of spending against their claims of hardship. He told me to keep the slides ready and said, "Truth works best when it is quiet." When we finished, Samuel asked if I wanted one more layer of protection. He mentioned that Jake was still using a company tablet registered under my cleaning business. With my permission, he guided me through filing a lien on it. The lien meant the device could not be sold or transferred without my consent. It was a small thing, but it added a legal knot around their carelessness. I clicked submit and felt a strange satisfaction. It was not revenge in the way movies show. It was a patient kind of justice, a message that said, "I see what you have taken, and I am not invisible anymore." When I left the office, the wind on Fountain Square felt cooler, as if the world had moved a few inches back into place. I walked slowly to my car, clutching the blue folder, knowing that I finally had something solid in my hands. A week later, the first consequence landed without warning. My phone buzzed with a new email titled, "Notice of Late Payment." The mortgage for the blue ash house had not been paid. Without my auto pay, the debt sat untouched. The message from the bank sounded formal and sharp. Jake forwarded it to me with a desperate line. "Mom, can you please cover it just this once?" I stared at his message and felt no guilt. They had built their life like a house balanced on someone else's shoulders. Now the floor beneath them shifted. I did not reply. That same afternoon, Brittany posted a story about manifesting joy, showing Lily painting in the living room. The room looked bright and peaceful. No one would guess that a warning letter from the bank sat in their inbox. That is how the world works sometimes. Pain hides under curated pictures. That night, Jake called again. I let it ring until voicemail. The recording played his voice cracking as he said, "We cannot pay everything at once. You know that, please do not do this." I pressed delete. No mother wants to hear her child cry, but I thought of every night I cleaned offices, to pay bills that were not mine, every time they told me I was too much, every time they took money meant for Lily. I had carried their load for so long that they believed the load was weightless. Now they would discover its true weight. Samuel called and said the demand letter had been delivered. He told me it was clear and legally strong. If they refused repayment, we had options. I thanked him and placed the blue folder in a drawer next to the old sewing gloves Mark had once repaired. I thought of Lily, her small hands holding crayons, and I prayed she would grow up understanding respect better than her parents did. The next morning, I cleaned an office in blue ash. While wiping fingerprints off a glass door, I glanced out the window and saw the sky streaked with orange. The sunrise felt like something new was beginning, even if the world looked the same. I thought of Jake and Brittany reading the letter. I imagined their shock, their anger, the sense of losing control. But they had never been in control. They just believed they were. Money had given them the illusion of power. My silence had made them believe I was weak. But silence can be the space where strength rebuilds. A few days later, I received a short message from Jake. "Let us talk. We can fix this." I wrote back, "When respect returns, then maybe." There was no reply. The bank sent another notice. Interest gathered. Late fees hovered. Their perfect suburban life was paper thin, and now the paper was tearing. I placed the notices behind the blue folder. I kept everything. I was no longer the mother who paid quietly. I was the woman who opened her eyes. Justice has a sound. Not loud and angry. It sounds like a page turning a signature, drying a door closing. Thanksgiving that year felt colder than usual. Cincinnati had a thin layer of frost over every rooftop, and the sky looked like brushed steel. St. Cecilia Hall was decorated with paper turkeys and orange tablecloths, the kind of simple community effort that always made me feel warm even when life felt cold. Families carried crockpots and foil trays inside. Children chased each other around folding chairs. It was supposed to be a day about gratitude. Instead, it became the day the truth finally stood up. I arrived with a tray of sweet potato casserole and placed it on the long buffet table. I saw Jake and Brittany near the center of the room talking to a small circle of parents. Brittany leaned in close to a woman wearing a PTA badge and whispered while glancing in my direction. The woman's expression shifted from surprise to sympathy. Brittany's voice carried just enough. She said, "We are struggling because my husband's mother cut us off suddenly. She said it was cruel. She said we had to start a GoFundMe to keep our home." She even pulled up her phone to show the page and the dramatic wording about hardship and abandonment. A few parents murmured with concern. I stood still and let the humiliation pass over me like a shadow. But today was not like the PTA fundraiser. Today I did not walk into the hallway to cry. Today I was prepared. At the front of the hall, the pastor invited everyone to sit for a moment of thanks. People settled at long tables, plates full of turkey stuffing and cranberry sauce. The microphone squeaked once. The pastor shared a short prayer about kindness and honesty. His words echoed through the hall, and when he stepped aside, he gestured for anyone to share something. I stood up. I did not shake. My heart beat steady. I walked to the front carrying the blue folder and a small remote. The projector lit up the wall behind me, a bright rectangle waiting for truth. I clicked the first slide. A list of monthly transfers appeared, dates amounts all leading to a total that made jaws tighten. I said I want to share something because silence can tell a lie better than words. These are the amounts I transferred to Jake and Brittany for the last 18 months. They said they were tight. They said they could not pay bills, so I helped. I clicked again. The second slide appeared. Screenshots of text messages, Jake's words clearly visible. "We will pay you back when things get better." I said, "These are not gifts. These are loans. Loans that were promised to be repaid." I clicked the third slide. The projector showed a timeline of luxury spending, screenshots of Britney's posts, the Italian sofa, the champagne at Jeff Ruby's, expensive dinners, brunch selfies, each picture beside the date when they told me they did not have enough for the mortgage. The room fell silent. Even the children seemed to pause their running. I could feel the shift in the air as if everyone in the room was holding their breath. I reached into the folder and placed a sheet on the table with a QR code. If anyone wanted to see the full timeline with receipts, they could scan it. I said quietly and clearly I was told to keep distance. I obeyed with my money. The words echoed in the hall. For a moment, no one spoke. Then a whisper moved through the tables like wind. Parents leaned toward each other, eyes wide. A man at the far table folded his arms, uncomfortable. A mother covered her mouth. Britney's face turned bright red. She stood up and tried to speak, but her voice cracked. She said, "This is harassment." She said I was making them look bad. She said I was destroying her family. I stayed calm. I said, "Every number comes from my bank. Every photo comes from your public posts. Nothing here is fake." Jake pushed his chair back and stood. His hands shook. He looked at me with eyes full of panic and something like shame. He said, "Mom, we did not mean for it to get like this." He tried to take a step forward, but Britney grabbed his arm. Her voice rose. She said, "Older generations like her just want everyone to feel sorry for them." She called me manipulative. She called me dramatic. A parent from Lily's class, a quiet woman named Teresa, stood up holding her phone. She said, "I think everyone should see this." She walked forward and showed the screen to the pastor. It was a screenshot dated the same day Britney had asked for money, claiming they were tight. The screenshot showed a message from Britney, bragging about closet remodel mood board. Pictures of chandeliers, racks of shoes, and velvet curtains. The timing was undeniable. The room shifted again. Sympathy vanished. Silence deepened. Then came the whispers that sounded like justice. The pastor looked at Britney and then at me. He did not say anything, but his eyes said enough. Parents began turning away from Britney. One woman picked up her child and moved to another table. Another parent who had contributed to the GoFundMe looked furious. She said, "Is this where our donations went?" Britney opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. Jake sank into his chair like a man shrinking from the world. I turned to the pastor and said I did not come here to embarrass anyone. I came to tell the truth. I carried this family alone for years. When I finally stepped back, they tried to paint me as cruel. Today I wanted the truth to speak louder than lies. I thanked everyone for listening. No anger, no shouting, just quiet truth. Then I stepped away from the microphone and walked toward the exit. As I passed the buffet table, I saw my casseroles half empty. People had eaten from my dish even while believing I was the villain. Now they knew I was the one feeding more than food. Outside, the wind cut across the parking lot. The sun was low and golden. I heard the hall behind me fill with low murmurs. Britney's voice rose again, but softer this time. Jake said her name, and his tone sounded broken. I walked to my car and placed the folder in the passenger seat. My hands were steady. My breath was steady. Justice is not loud. It is heavy. It lands in silence and changes the ground beneath it. The week after, St. Cecilia Hall felt like a brake run, where the car still moved fast, but every inch of track rubbed the metal raw. The first notice hit on Monday morning. Jake forwarded the bank email with a subject line that read, "Default warning." The body of the message said the mortgage was now officially overdue, and that failure to cure the late payment would trigger penalties and potential acceleration. 2 hours later, Britney sent a screenshot of the furniture finance app where the annual percentage rate had climbed after a credit review. She wrote, "What did you do to us?" as if the math itself were a weapon I held. I looked at both messages and thought about how many years I had covered everything so no one would ever see the word default attached to their name. Now the word sat there like a verdict. The phone plan change reached them next. Their group chat lit up with complaints about data throttling and new activation fees. Brittany said the new bill was outrageous and called the carrier heartless. I stared at that line and wondered why she never used the word heartless for the nights I cleaned offices while they unboxed luxury purchases. Jake tried to refill his tank and discovered the gas card no longer worked. He texted me from a station off Montgomery Road and said the pump declined 3 times and asked if there was a mistake. I typed no mistake. He did not respond. By Wednesday, rumors from the potluck had spread wider than Brittany expected. A brand that had been using her for small influencer posts reached out to ask about the GoFundMe. Someone had sent them the slides. They suspended the partnership while they reviewed what they called integrity concerns. Brittany posted a vague story about online hate and jealousy, then deleted it within an hour. The quiet backlash had already taken root. I knew because 3 of her friends unfollowed her, and one parent who had donated left a pointed comment asking for a refund. The cost of image management rose when the free well of my money dried. The default warning triggered a series of phone calls and texts that sounded increasingly frantic. Jake asked for a meeting in person. He said he would come alone. I waited a full day before replying. Then I sent a short email from my account to his. We will meet only at my lawyer's office. Bring a list of all outstanding debts and your identification. This is not optional. He replied with a single line, I will be there. Setting that boundary felt like setting a bone that had healed crooked. Painful at first, necessary for the future. That night I slept for 6 straight hours without waking to worry. The next day, Brittany called me from an unknown number. I answered because I thought it might be a doctor or a neighbor. Her voice came through sharp and cold. She said that I had humiliated her at the church hall and that she would never forgive me. She said this was all Jake's fault because he should have kept me on a leash. She said if he kept listening to me, she would file for separation and seek primary custody of Lily because a child should not live in financial chaos. The words hit me like a slap I did not see coming. Not because I believed her, because she weaponized Lily. I spoke calmly. I said threatening custody as revenge would hurt Lily most. She laughed and said everything's already hurting because of you. I hung up before the poison could fill me. After that call, I wrote down exactly what she had said. Dates, times, words. I kept the note in the blue folder. Family conflict looks one way on social media. In reality, it is a line of sentences that cut your skin a little at a time. On Friday, the bank sent a second notice. Late fees were attached. The email used phrases like immediate attention required and risk of foreclosure. Jake forwarded it with no comment. He showed up at my door a few hours later. He looked smaller than his age, shoulders slumped under a hoodie, eyes red from sleep he could not catch. He knocked softly and said, Mom, please. I opened the door a few inches and held it there. He asked if we could sit at my table just to talk. I said we will talk at Samuel's office on Monday at 3. He nodded and said, all right. He tried to smile, but his face flickered with shame. He whispered that Brittany had told him to choose. I asked, choose what? He said choose between doing things her way and losing Lily more days, or doing what I asked and trying to repair what he broke. My throat tightened, but I kept my voice even. I said that real repair starts with honesty. He nodded again and left, walking down the stairs without looking back. After he left, I sat on the couch and stared at the door. Revenge emotional is not always fire. Sometimes it is the quiet knowledge that you survived the worst version of yourself and you are not willing to go back. That weekend, Brittany posted pictures of Lily at a playground and wrote grateful for simple joys. A parent from school commented with a link to the GoFundMe and asked if it was still active. No one liked the post. No one defended her. She deleted the photo an hour later. The next morning, Tricia texted me to say that Brittany was considering moving in with her for a while because the house might need to be sold if this went on. She implied that if I had any decency, I would fix the mess for the sake of Lily. I typed back that decency had paid their bills for years, and that decency had limits. She did not reply. On Monday, Jake arrived at Samuel's office carrying a folder with a printed list of debts. He looked like a man walking into a storm he could not outrun. I watched him through the glass door for a moment and then walked in with the blue folder. Samuel greeted us both and asked us to sit. He spoke calmly. He said we were going to review the demand letter and set terms for repayment. He said this was not a courtroom. It was a table where adults could behave like adults. Jake nodded and said he wanted to make things right. My chest ached, and yet I felt proud of the boundary that brought him here. While we spoke, Samuel received a call from a client and stepped out. During those minutes, Jake told me Brittany had called a lawyer to ask about custody leverage, and that the lawyer told her judges do not look kindly on parents who use children to punish others. He said she blamed him for everything that happened at St. Cecilia Hall and called me manipulative again. He said she told him that if he signed anything with Samuel, she would make sure he regretted it. My hands stayed still on the table. I told Jake that the only thing worth regretting would be choosing pride over a path forward. Samuel returned with copies of the repayment schedule and the documents that outlined what would happen next. He handed Jake a pen and asked him to take the week to think before signing. Jake said, "I do not need a week." He said, "I need a plan." He held the pen as if it were heavy and nodded. He did not sign yet, but something in his face had changed. After the meeting, I walked outside and let the air cool my cheeks. The fallout was not over. It might get worse before it got better. The mortgage notices would keep coming. The influencer work had already faded. The furniture payment would climb with every missed due date. The phone plan would keep costing more. Family stories had turned on them, and the story financial reality had arrived at their doorstep. But in the middle of that noise, I felt a small stillness. It sounded like respect returning line by line. The first real break in the storm came a week after that meeting, and it sounded nothing like peace. Samuel called me early on a Tuesday and said Jake wanted to return this time with Brittany because she insisted on being present. I agreed, only because conversations under a lawyer's roof are conversations that cannot be twisted later. When I arrived, Jake was already there, sitting with his hands clasped so tight his knuckles looked white. Brittany paced near the window, arms crossed, phone in her hand like a shield. She did not say hello. She said, "This is ridiculous." I sat down across from them and waited. Samuel opened a folder and said we will review terms calmly and respectfully. Brittany laughed. Calm is not her tone. She said Elaine has always needed control, always needed attention, always needed to feel important. She called me dramatic, said I caused embarrassment at the church, said I exaggerated everything to ruin her reputation. Her voice was sharp, but her eyes were frantic. I stayed quiet because silence often speaks louder than anger. Samuel read through the repayment schedule, 60% of the loan over 5 years. After the house sells, Jake would begin monthly payments of around $2,400 to $2,600. Jake nodded slowly while Brittany shook her head. "This is insane," she said. "Why should we pay her back for helping family?" Samuel answered evenly that text messages showed promises to repay, and that the court would see those messages as evidence of a loan, not a gift. Brittany rolled her eyes and said Jake never agreed to that. Samuel slid printed screenshots across the table. Jake looking at his phone months ago writing, "We will pay you back once things settle." Brittany's face cracked, then hardened. She said he did not mean it literally. "You cannot expect us to live like this." Jake stared at the table. He whispered, "We already are living like this. Our credit is collapsing. Bills are late. Lily notices everything." Brittany snapped that none of this would have happened if Elaine had kept sending money like before. That was the moment I spoke. I said, "You asked for distance." I simply respected the request. Brittany's cheeks flushed. She said a real mother would never weaponize money. I said a real mother would never have to choose between feeding herself and feeding the selfish pride of her son's wife. The room fell silent. Samuel continued, In addition to repayment, there will be no more regular assistance, only medical emergencies for Lily or Jake. Everything else is your responsibility." Brittany stood and said, "You love holding power." I said power was never the point. Respect was. Samuel moved on. Third term. Lily will visit Elaine whenever she wishes. Brittany objected higher this time. She said Elaine fills the child's head with guilt. Jake said softly, "She only bakes cookies and reads books." Brittany ignored him and said Lily will visit only with my permission. I answered that Lily is a child, not a possession. She should not have to ask an adult's permission to love another adult. Samuel wrote down the term exactly as agreed. When Brittany realized nothing was bending, she turned her attention to Jake. "How can you sit there and let her treat you like this?" Jake did not look at her. His voice cracked. "She treated us like family for years. We treated her like a bank." Brittany scoffed and said, "You have always been weak." Jake flinched at the word. The fourth term was simple, but heavy. A public apology, an email to family, and a brief note to the pastor acknowledging the truth about financial help and humiliation. Brittany laughed again and said absolutely not. She said she had done nothing wrong. She said the church would take her side. She said GoFundMe was just a misunderstanding. She stormed out of the room and slammed the door. We heard her yelling in the hallway. Jake stared at the door but did not chase her. He reached for the pen. His hand trembled. Samuel asked, "Do you want time to think?" Jake shook his head. He said, "I have had time to think for years." He signed. His tears dropped on the paper, small dark spots on white. I felt the ache in my chest, but I did not reach across the table. Sometimes helping means letting someone stand alone. After he signed, he whispered, "I am sorry, Mom." I said, "I know. Apologies are only words until actions follow them." He nodded and wiped his face. I left the building and sat in my car for a long while, staring at the signature as if it were a map leading out of a maze. 2 months passed slowly. Brittany refused every request from Samuel's office. She refused to hand over receipts related to the house. She refused mediation. She refused every term of the agreement that required accountability. She refused to speak in front of a neutral witness. Jake followed through. He listed the house for sale. The first offer was lower than expected, but he accepted it because time was running against him. The mortgage company sent another warning and a timeline. The day the sale papers were signed, Brittany filed a preliminary divorce petition. The news came through a short email from Jake. He wrote she filed today. She blamed me for everything. She said she married a man who was supposed to give her a better life, and now she has nothing. I read that line and closed my eyes. Story Financial Reality does not care about pride. It cares about numbers. She left the house with her clothes and her vanity mirror. Jake stayed with a mattress and a few boxes. Lily split her time between their apartments. Brittany cried on social media about betrayal and cruel family. Comments were not kind. People remembered the GoFundMe. They remembered the slides. Screenshots resurfaced of her bragging about the closet remodel on the very day she told neighbors they were struggling. The divorce paperwork traveled fast and publicly because Brittany did not know how to do anything quietly. It spread through PTA chat groups, through church text threads, through Instagram whispers. Betrayal family karma has a way of echoing louder than anyone expects. During those weeks, Jake met with Samuel again to finalize the repayment structure. Every month, $2,400 landed in my account, sometimes late, never skipped. Jake did not ask for favors. He took extra shifts at the logistics company. He sold the Italian sofa. He canceled streaming subscriptions. He packed school lunches instead of ordering takeout. He sent photos of Lily reading on the couch of the small apartment. The pictures looked softer than the ones from the big house, less decor, more warmth. The day the divorce became official, Brittany posted a photo of champagne and wrote "New Beginnings." It got 3 likes. She deleted it within hours. I did not respond. I did not speak her name. Justice often looks quiet from the outside, but from the inside, it feels like the air changing shape. At night, I sat on my porch in Oakley with a cup of chamomile tea and watched the streetlights glow. Revenge story money had never been the goal. The goal was respect. The goal was dignity. The goal was telling the truth out loud after years of swallowing it. When Lily came over on Saturdays, she carried her small backpack and ran into my arms as if nothing had ever changed. We baked cookies. We read books. We sewed a doll wearing a blue dress. She asked once when Mommy would calm down. I told her grown-ups sometimes need time to learn lessons they should have learned when they were young. She accepted that answer with the ease only a child can hold. Jake thanked me for keeping my word. He did not ask for forgiveness again. He worked for it through actions, and I respected that effort. The sale of the house closed at the end of summer. The market had cooled, and the listing had lingered for weeks, dropping in price 3 times before a young couple with a new baby offered an amount that barely covered the mortgage balance and fees. After closing costs and penalties, the remaining sum was just enough for Jake to hand me a cashier's check for $140,000. He placed it on my kitchen table with both hands as if the paper weighed more than stone. I accepted it without triumph and without apology. He said, "This belongs to you," and I said, "It is only part of what was mine." He nodded and did not argue. The rest of the repayment continued month by month, $2,400, arriving quietly into my account, like a slow correction after years of imbalance. Brittany did not speak to me. She moved into her mother's spare room, the same woman who once told me older women should leave young families alone. Credit card statements followed her there. The finance company demanded payment for furniture she could no longer claim because she had left most of it at the house. The closet remodel never happened. The fancy plans with mirrors and soft lighting stayed trapped inside a mood board on her phone. The debt sat on her shoulders instead of mine. There is a certain symmetry in that. I did not cheer for her struggle. I did not need to. Life was already teaching her what pride refuses to learn. I spent my own autumn in smaller and quieter places. I signed up for a watercolor class at the Cincinnati Art Academy. My hands had stitched fabric for 20 years, but they had never held a paintbrush with any purpose. The first day, my lines were crooked, my colors muddy, and I laughed in a way I had not laughed in years. Creating something only for myself felt like learning to breathe again. On Saturday nights, Lily slept over and we made cookies with too many chocolate chips. She helped me sew dolls with tiny cotton dresses. She talked about school and dogs and the new apartment where she had her own soft blanket and a small bookshelf Jake found at a thrift store. She said it felt warm there, even though it was smaller. Her words settled into me like a gentle truth. A home grows in peace, not in cost. Story Financial Reality had taken so much from her parents, but it gave her something real in return. After Lily fell asleep, I sometimes sat in the living room with the lamp glowing low and stitched buttons onto new dolls. I thought about the years I spent closing myself down to make space for others. I thought about the quiet ways women hide their exhaustion. Every stitch was like saying, "I remember myself again." One evening, Jake sent me a photo of Lily curled up with a chapter book on that thrifted bookshelf. The walls were bare, the rug was secondhand, and yet the image felt warmer than the $1,000 dining chairs that once sat in their old house. Jake wrote, "She is happier now." He wrote, "I am happier now." He wrote, "Thank you for letting me learn." I stared at the screen for a long time. Forgiveness is not a gift you hand over like a receipt. It grows slowly where trust is watered by action. I replied, "You are doing well. Keep going. Nothing more, nothing less." Some people think revenge is loud. They picture shouting or courtrooms or slammed doors. The truth is often quieter. Justice can be a woman sitting at a wooden table painting blue water across white paper, knowing she no longer needs to buy her place in anyone's life. The phone that once carried demands and insults now carried nothing but photos of Lily and occasional notes about school art fairs. My evenings no longer smelled like worry. They smelled like lavender lotion and fresh tea and the faint sweetness of cookie dough. Unconditional love is a beautiful thing. Unconditional disrespect is not. I spent my whole life believing those two ideas lived in the same house. Now I know they do not. When I look back, I remember the humiliation at the fundraiser, the debt hidden behind luxury, the cruel words about senior centers and burdens. Yet none of those memories hurt the way they once did. Healing has its own weather. Some days are cloudy, some days are bright, but every day moves forward. On the first day of winter, Jake and Lily came by to drop off a handmade card. Lily had painted 3 hearts in watercolor, and inside she wrote, "Thank you for loving me." Jake stood in the doorway and asked if he could hug me. I opened my arms and let him. He did not apologize again. He did not ask for anything. He simply held his mother. In that small moment, we both understood that respect had finally come home. I still keep the blue folder with receipts and screenshots and letters, not to use against anyone, but to remind myself that truth matters even when people deny it. Closure is not forgetting. Closure is choosing what deserves your energy. By spring, the grass outside my apartment turned bright green. Neighbors walked dogs. Children rode bikes. Life no longer felt like a weight I had to carry for someone else. Life felt like a garden I could tend for myself. The final pieces of the repayment schedule continued on quietly. I did not track every dollar with bitterness. I tracked them with clarity. Justice had not ruined anyone. Choices had. My story is not about punishing family. It is about reclaiming what was mine financially and emotionally. It is about dignity over money and standing up for yourself when silence becomes suffocation. It is about learning that revenge through truth does not require shouting. It requires holding your ground. Tonight, as I finish this story, I sit on my balcony under the warm porch light. My newest painting dries beside me. It is not perfect, but it is mine. The cotton trees in the distance sway in the wind. Lily's laughter still echoes from last weekend. I have learned that you can love someone deeply and still say no. You can forgive without returning to the place where you were hurt. You can choose a quiet justice. If you have ever carried a wound like mine, if you have ever lived inside a toxic family or watched a betrayal unfold around money or trust, write one sentence for someone suffering tonight. Tell them there is a way out. Tell them respect can return. Tell them closure can be gentle. Choose silent revenge, emotional resilience, dignity over money, standing up for yourself, reclaiming respect and justice without hate, because truth has a way of coming home.